South Africa, as you know from news reports, has one of the highest teen pregnancy rates in the world. World Health Organization data suggests that as many as 1 in 4 girls fall pregnant before the age of 20. Our own latest figures from Stats South Africa tell us more than 90,000 teenage girls gave birth in South Africa in the latest monitoring period, which was March 2021 to April 2022. 90,000 teen births, and more than 600 of those girls were under the age of 13. Now, in a bid to tackle this alarming situation, a local social activist has launched a petition calling for a shift of policy, calling for healthcare professionals to be required to report any pregnancy in a minor to police so that they can initiate a statutory rape investigation. More than 6,000 people have already signed support for the petition. Let's find out a little bit more as we welcome its creator, Kekeletso Khena, to the show. Kekeletso, welcome. Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having us, and good afternoon to the listeners.
And to you as well. As a matter of interest, do other countries have this kind of compulsory reporting policy in place, as far as you know?
Not that I know of, and particularly not in the continent. And sadly, as we speak, Kenya has now been ranked number 1 in terms of teenage pregnancy. So you know that it is an African problem, but I think it's also a poverty issue. And this is something that we are skirting around quite a lot.
Would you like to elaborate?
So when you look at the numbers of teenage pregnancy in South Africa, you find that a lot of the ones that we have been speaking to are children between the ages of 10 and 14, who are generally easily coerced by older people into sexual relations. Now, what complicates the issue for us in the continent and here in South Africa is some of the so-called customary laws. These laws enable an older person who has impregnated a child to then go to the family and say to them, okay, so I've impregnated your 10, 12, 14-year-old, and what I'm going to do is pay 2 cows for her virginity and pay you a cow or maybe 2 for having made her pregnant, which is what we call intlawulo. And that is the end of the story. And so you find that pedophiles are getting away with raping children. And what then happens is that, one, the family needs the money, and so they're happy to keep quiet. Secondly, the family is not just embarrassed, they're thinking, we cannot afford to look after this new additional mouth in the family. So if this man is a well-known guy or a guy that has got, is working and has income, it's easy because, hey, why don't we just send the child and the pregnant one together? And this is when, you now have child pregnancies. There is just so much happening. There are so many layers that are linked to these teen pregnancies. And we're not throwing enough of a spotlight towards it. There is this constant blaming of children, and particularly teenagers, and patholizing teenagers and making it about them. Oh, these children are forward, these children like things. And nobody is looking at what are the numbers, who are the parents. Nobody even knows what the stats are. And this is what this campaign is about. It's like, let's drill down and find out who is impregnating these children. And once we do that, at least we can put them in jail. At least we can put the right kinds of deterrents in place to be able to protect our children.
Kekeletso, is part of the problem that people misunderstand the concepts of statutory rape, the age of consent, what the law deems acceptable, if not advisable, because it's changed over the years, and there are some sort of details in the difference of age between the 2 consenting parties in some case. Do you think part of the problem is that people tend not to report because they say, oh, well, it's allowed, it's not actually a crime that's been committed unless it's a much older person with a much younger girl, for example?
I think, yes, part of the issue is not understanding the age of consent, that the various departments are not doing enough to educate the public on the issues of consent. And consent right up from the age of consent, right up to adults in a marriage, Just in South Africa, I just get the sense that we don't understand the issue of consent, but more so where children are concerned. People don't understand that children under the age of 16 cannot consent to sex. That's one. Secondly, even at that age, if there is an age difference of 2 years, it is still statutory rape. So if an 18-year-old is having sex with a 16-year-old, it is still a problem. And those are some of the little technicalities that people do not understand around statutory rape, that we need to then have campaigns like this given enough spotlight so that we can have conversations, so that we can teach people about the age of consent, so that we can at least maybe conscientize people to the fact that it is wrong to have sex with children. It always has been, regardless of what the age of consent is. Even at 16, this is still a child. This is still a teenager. You're finding old men having sex with teenagers. It's just morally wrong, and we need to call it out.
Now, Kekeletso, in adopting this particular petition, which is calling for it to be made obligatory for healthcare professionals to report any teen pregnancy, you're building on existing legislation. I know that there are laws in place that require that kind of reporting within the school system. It's a sort of a notifiable thing that a school needs to report if a learner is pregnant who is still a teenager. What would be the value of adding in the medical officers into that reporting process? I mean, does it signify that it's not working in the school system? Are people taking children out of the school system because they know it might be reported?
Absolutely. So yes, the Learner Pregnancy in Schools Act does require the school management or anybody in the school system to notify the police if a child is pregnant. However, what then happens, like I said, because of these whole customary things and payments that get made to parents or the guardians, these children get taken out of school. However, these children still must go to a health practitioner for their checkups. They must still go and give birth somewhere, whether they do it within the public healthcare system, the private healthcare system, or even the traditional healthcare system. What we are trying to do with this campaign is the Department of Health regulates both the Western medical system as well as the traditional medical system. So in that way, this child must go give birth in a hospital or with a doula or with a traditional healer, wherever. Whoever is going to help the child give birth must then notify authorities, and their failure to do this puts them in a position where if a neighbor or the child's aunt or the cousin knows that mom so-and-so helped my cousin give birth, that person could then be held accountable for not having reported the issue. So at the end of the day, we can then make sure that that issue is reported and that police can then investigate and make sure that predators are not taking advantage of children. And this is why we are targeting particularly the Department of Health. Obviously, like you said, the legislation, and if you look at the Child Protection Act, it sort of does say that, you know, everyone has a responsibility to notify. But within the healthcare sector, the doctor-patient privileges preclude medical personnel from being able to tell. And this is why a lot of people who have come across this campaign think, now this is a frivolous campaign because the Child Protection Act already covers this. Actually, it does not. And this is why we need people to sign the campaign so that we can tell government to make this a policy so that we can protect our children, because currently the healthcare sector is actually excluded from having to notify authorities on the pregnancies of minors.
One of our listeners pointing out a question that I think is a very valid one. Is there not perhaps an unintended risk here that the unintended consequence of making medical practitioners report is that some underage girls might avoid seeking medical care altogether because they fear the repercussions if they know a doctor is obliged to report it? Have you considered that?
We have, and we understand that people who are already scared to come out are already not coming out. But at the same time, we are also aware of the fact that if somebody in the community knows that a child is pregnant, they then, inadvertently will then also be required to report whoever helps that child to give birth, even if it's their own mother. So if it's the mother that assists the child to give birth, that mother automatically becomes a doula, which then obligates her to have notified. So the community would now know, Sibongile, a 10, 12, 14-year-old has given birth. Therefore, the mother would have assisted. Now, the mother must be held accountable for not having reported the matter. At the end of the day, we want to drill down to make sure that everyone who knows about this child that was pregnant has a responsibility to make sure that authorities are told, because we have got to protect children. At the end of the day, we have to do what we can to protect our children. It's not enough for us to be a country of outrage. We collect statistics, yes, and then we're outraged for 5 days on Twitter. But then our children are still left vulnerable. Something has got to be done. These older people are raping children. Something has got to be done.
Kekeletso, in closing, if somebody listening to this would like to read the petition, understand more fully what you're arguing, and perhaps lend their support to it, where do they find it?
It's on change.org. You can look for making pregnancies of minors by notifiable incidences. So it's making pregnancies of minors a notifiable incident. It's on change.org. Please go and sign it. Please go and share it. We need enough signatures to be able to convince the state that this is important and that we need to protect our children.
Kekeletso Khena, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Lunch with Pippa Hudson
on CapeTalk.